Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers on the channel by the end of the year, so your subscription will be much appreciated. You know, doing that fast is a really good bit, but it's also just completely skipping the point because nobody knows what the fuck I'm saying in the intro. What I am saying is subscribe, so there you go. This is part 2 of the most underrated players on the most underrated player, singular, not plural, on each team. If you want to watch part 1, which is going over the Western Conference, that is the most recent upload on this channel, and this one will be doing the Eastern Conference, so let's get into it. By the way, I didn't clarify this. The order of the teams is just the order of the standings from the previous season, and that means we start with the Philadelphia 76ers, where my pick is Seth Curry. I always felt Seth was a little underrated and not given enough opportunity. I saw it specifically in Portland, and then he went on to Dallas, and even in Dallas, he really wasn't given as much opportunity as I would have liked. And then he went to the Sixers, and it really finally started to seem like he became a big focal part of a team, and his shooting was very essential to that team, and he is one of the best shooters in the NBA, and, you know, we tend to value that now, so I always thought it was weird how Seth was not quite as appreciated as I thought he should be. But, you know, getting there more now, but overall still a little underrated. Also, all of this is arbitrary, so it's like hard to argue why someone is or isn't underrated just because, I don't know, it's just a general sense that I feel he's better than what people generally think about this player. For the Brooklyn Nets, I have Patty Mills. Thought he was a good addition, granted. Jeff Green. You know what? How the fuck did I not have Jeff Green as my most underrated player on the Nuggets? That's a complete mental lapse on my fault. Aaron Gordon's good, but Jeff Green's more underrated than him. Anyways, the loss of Jeff Green with the Nets, I thought kind of offset the addition of Patty Mills. That said, Patty Mills was a good addition, and I think he could potentially be in a Sixth Man of the Year conversation just simply because he's on a contender. But he might actually end up starting half of the season because Kyrie Irving. For the Bucks, Dante Di Vincenzo, I feel like Dante kind of gets left out of conversations because he missed almost all of the playoffs, which to some extent that makes sense, but Dante is a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. He's a pretty good defender. He's a pretty good three-point shooter, and he is very often someone who flashes scoring ability, even though it's not, you know, something that we can expect all the time. But he does showcase ability to be an all-around player. Right now, just a good 3-and-D player who shows flashes of creating ability and fits well within what the Bucks want to do. And his loss was a rather big one and went a little bit under the rug when talking about the Bucks in the playoffs. For the Knicks, Alec Burks. Alec Burks is like one of those players who's just like perpetually underrated. And if you know, you know, but there's a lot of people who don't know. He had that, I don't remember what game it was, but there was one game versus the Hawks where he had like 25 points. If I'm not mistaken, that's the only game that they won in the series where he just went off, and it was all Alec Burks. Speaking of the Hawks, they're next up, and that is Deandre Hunter for me. Deandre averaged like 15 points per game on good efficiency in the 20 or so games he played last year. Those numbers might have been diluted a little bit by playing to close the season from what I remember, but I don't know for sure. But DeAndre is a really talented defensive player. He showcased that versus Julius Randle. And then offensively, his three ball is a little inconsistent, but he has a good pull-up jumper. He's got decent enough handle. He's a good finisher. Like, I think he has the skill set as well as the size to be like a relatively efficient 18 a game within the Hawks offense. Not necessarily next season, but, you know, projecting a few years down the line. And great defensive player, so that's great. For the Miami Heat, this is a deep cut, and I'm basing this entirely on like 3-4 summer league games. I don't know. They signed this guy. I believe he played for the Thunder at one point because when I tweeted about him, 3Cone, if you don't know who he is on Twitter, he said something like Thunder legend. So I presume he played for the Thunder at some point. And I hope I'm pronouncing this name correctly, but it's Omer Yurtseven, who, when I saw him play in the Summer League, he was fantastic on both ends of the floor. I understand it was a Summer League and a couple game sample size, but genuinely, he was just really well-rounded offensively, defensively. He seemed to have versatility on the perimeter defensively while also being a big in the paint. He's a little skinny, but he's really tall and lengthy. And then on offense, like pull-up shots, three-pointers, played well within the pick and roll, good finishing at the rim, offensive rebounding, post moves. Like, he kind of showed the whole package in the limited sample that I saw, and I was like, there's enough here that I would sign this guy, and the Heat did do that. But if he doesn't get much opportunity next year, which I don't expect he will, if I was a team like the Thunder, ironically, that really, had room to see a guy maybe show potential, I would give him some opportunity. And I think, for that reason, I don't know, underrated, like he's barely known at all, so I guess that would make him underrated. But I think it was a limited sample size, so I'm not basing a whole lot on it, but there was stuff there for sure. For the Boston Celtics, Al Horford, and I've said this a couple of times now, Al Horford is still a really damn good NBA player. His numbers in Philly were not that different from his career numbers. The situation around him was just terrible, and his impact was less because the fit was terrible, but that wasn't his fault. People give Embiid the benefit of the doubt, and they did give Ben Simmons the benefit of the doubt from that season because of how bad that fit was. But then they don't give Al Horford that same benefit of the doubt just because he was the new guy to the equation. But Al Horford was also dealing with a bad situation with that team. So I don't know why these guys get a pass, but this guy doesn't, when everyone knew it was a bad fit, and that includes the addition, not just the people that were already there. So Al Horford, still a good player, still not that much worse than he was 3 or 4 years ago when he was an all-star. So don't understand why people dismiss the idea that Al Horford is a good player. I wouldn't even say he's that drastically overpaid. It was just he was severely overpaid for how much of a disaster he was in Philadelphia. Not because he played poorly, but because the on-the-court product wasn't good because of how he played. But like $20 million a year for a center who's going to be a really good defensive player and pretty good offensively, it's not that crazy of an overpay. For the Wizards, Rui Hachimira. Rui is, I really like Rui. I don't know what it is, but there's something about him that's, I know what it is actually. I like big forwards, and I like guys who can shoot mid-range shots really well. And he is a big forward who shoots mid-range shots really well. So actually, I do know why I like him. But he has some serious offensive potential. Having that ability to create pull-up shots, really the biggest thing is if he could just hit three-pointers, his offensive game is well-rounded enough for him to easily be a 20-point guy at some point in his career. For the Hornets, Miles Bridges, I'll breeze over this one quickly. He had a 30-game, a 25-game, 30-game, something like that sample towards the end of the season where there were a lot of injuries on the Hornets, and he averaged 20 points per game. So good on him for that. For the Bulls, Patrick Williams, I've talked about him to an obnoxious extent, so I'm going to just leave that as it is. Patrick Williams, underrated as a prospect and underrated in general, and I think he's going to play a bigger part in the success for the Bulls next year than some people are giving him credit for. For the Raptors, OG Anunoby, he is one of the best two-way players in the league, by far, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, by far, incredible defensive versatility and incredible on-ball defense, good team defender too, and then offensively, he took a significant leap last season where he went from 10 to 16 points per game. He continued to be a 40% three-point shooter, however, he doubled his three-point attempts to 6.5 a game, and he's a good ball handler and good attacking the rim, and I think this upcoming season he's going to get to 20 points per game just because there's more opportunity with no Kyle Lowry there, and he's just continued to make strides in his game anyways, so I think there would have been some development there regardless of Kyle Lowry. But yeah, OG, very good. For the Cavaliers, I don't know if you watched the Lakers Media Machine video, which I really don't like the title, but at the same time, it also is not bad for clicks, I suppose, for what that video is. But Darius Garland, I talked about him a lot in that video. I was using him as the example. Darius Garland is genuinely, he might be the most underrated young player in the league. He's certainly in the conversation as the most underrated young player in the league because he averaged 19 and 6 last year, 19 and 7, something like that. His efficiency was not the greatest in the world from an advanced stat, just from an advanced standpoint, just because doesn't get to the line a lot and not the greatest finisher at the rim in the world, but elite three-point shooter, great playmaker, and guards who if you're a small guard The two most important skills you can have are playmaking, and that's like lumping and ball handling in with playmaking. So like on-ball creation and passing, and three-point shooting, and more specifically, pull-up three-point shooting. And Darius Garland has both of those things locked down. So presuming he can build upon that foundation, he could go far. And I think he will go far. And then as for the Magic, Chuma Okeke, hopefully I'm saying that right. There's a very high probability I'm not. But he is a forward. He's more like a bigger guard forward, I guess. But I've seen a couple of games from him because I kind of just forced myself to watch bad teams, because I feel like I can't talk about the teams at any capacity if I don't. So I watched a good amount of Magic games last season as a result. And Chuma had a couple of games that impressed me. He's good at how would you describe it? Like hustle plays and energy and things like that. And then he has relatively, he definitely has a basis of offense to build around. Sorry if I was jumbled there. I was getting a bunch of texts at the same time, trying to read those and then also talk about Chuma Okeke. And then for the Pistons, Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, one of the best rookies last year. Nobody talks about him because he's a fundamental center who played for the Detroit Pistons, which is all kinds of levels of boring to many people. So not really often mentioned, but he was just fantastic. He averaged a double-double towards the end of the season. Good defensive player, versatile, even though he's undersized. The lack of size makes up for a little bit with the perimeter versatility. So yeah, he's really good as well. But that is my most underrated player on each team in the East. Again, last video on this channel is the West, so go check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, that is it. Goodbye. Oh, fuck. Episode 7 of my NBA series is also out. I should have put that in the intro, but I didn't. If you're watching at this point, I presume you fuck with me to some extent. So go watch that episode if you haven't already. That's it. Goodbye.